Cayman is the best iron weaver in the community. Council leader Bataille plants a sapling in defiance of the drought. And Maribor is her father's daughter. Hello. I can't imagine that's... sounds pretty obvious. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton.
Hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we are doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation. Guess what? Season 5, Episode 25, The Inner Light. Heard of it? Story by Morgan Gendel. Teleplay by Peter Allen Fields and Morgan Gendel. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Directed by Peter Lorison. This was May 30th, 1992. Where were you, and how are you today, Sirach?
Really good. Really good. This was a great episode.
Hey, we'd also like to give a very special thanks to our pal, Mark Zutkoff, for sponsoring this episode. This is a great choice, great episode. Thank you very much, Mark Zutkoff, for sponsoring this one.
Sweet.
Okay, so lots to talk about here. Everybody, please make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon for notifications. If you're listening in, give us a 5-star rating and a nice review. We'd really appreciate that. And join the team at patreon.com/the7th-rule. That's patreon.com/the7th-rule to help keep the lights on, as they say. So, Sirach, I feel as though, even though you've never watched this Star Trek episode in your life, this is your first time going through The Next Generation, your first time seeing The Inner Light, I feel as though you have heard of this episode because it seems as though people talk about this episode constantly. Had you heard about it, and what did you expect?
I expected a good episode. I had heard about it, but I didn't know what it was about. Yeah, I don't think I really kind of listened in on the discussion about what the episode is about. So maybe I just blocked it out of my head or wasn't really focused in on it. But it's kind of not what I expected. I don't know why, but it's just not what I expected.
Yeah.
But it was pleasantly a surprise because I was along for the ride. I wasn't sure what to expect, really. But this wasn't quite it.
What did you expect? Do you remember like any impressions you had of it?
You know, maybe in my mind, I think that it was more of a episode involving the cast more, as opposed to really being Picard and a whole nother cast, right? So that was probably the biggest thing for me, that I was like, oh, this is not even really, any one of the crew members that much, maybe, for 5 minutes of screen time. But for the most part, this is Picard's episode, and it's a solo episode with a whole new, guest stars and stuff. So that was basically the big surprise for me about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I watched it kind of recently, and I don't remember why or where, but maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago. But before that, I hadn't seen it since, it was on reruns in the 90s. And I remember that I thought it was like a mediocre episode. I was like, oh, whatever. It's just another one of those episodes where they go visit a planet. It's not the Dominion Wars. It's not something crazy and fun like Cause and Effect or The Best of Both Worlds or anything like that. It's just, it's a bottle episode. It's a very bottle episode. And it's just kind of, whatever. I thought it was mediocre or average. And then I remembered it being kind of a love story. So it's like, I know everybody loves it, but I don't care. It doesn't do anything for me. Then when I watch it, whatever it was more recently, a couple years ago, I was like, oh, I get it now. This is really good. It's a very touching story. It's a very simple story with a very simple point, but when they hit that point, it kind of hits you, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what good science fiction is about. That's why I think this really qualifies under that umbrella of good science fiction. It doesn't take a complicated story. It was pretty simple. Um, I did feel the captain in some kind of peril, so there was the like his life is in danger aspect of it. So there was a level of heightened concern about the outcome of what's going on. So that was great about it. Um, Also, the duality of him existing in another place and also existing on board the ship
Mm-hmm.
gave just was really well done for the purpose of storytelling. And I thought, as far as science fiction goes, this thematically had exactly what you're looking for. An overall message coded into science fiction and fantasy, um, and it worked well for me. I was along for the ride. At first, I was a little reluctant, because because one of the things I like about Star Trek is the future aspect of it. So being in the setting of a place that makes me feel like I'm in the future allows my mind to wander there. And sometimes when we go to these planet scenes and surfaces with these villages, it makes me think of the past more than it thinks of
Yeah,
the future for some reason. I don't know if that makes
sure.
sense. Because the way that villages are assembled and the council members and the limited technology, it feels like it's the past, right? And they're living sometimes in caves, and just in general feels like the technology is something that is not as advanced. And that puts me in a state of mind where I'm like, oh, okay, here we go with the primitive planet thing, and what's the interest in this particular story about this particular planet, and I'm glad that they went away from some of the traditional Star Trek kind of subject matter, which is, oh, we're on this planet and there's this warring factions
Right.
between
They love that one.
party A and party B, right? So I was like, oh, here we go. Is this one of those things where the community leader of that other tribe who comes over here and sees Picard has beef with the other leader, and there's this, warring tribe element, that's why he's there to resolve this thing or whatever. And it wasn't that. So I was happy about the twist in my expectations versus what I actually saw in the episode.
Yeah, it was definitely not that. And when I first saw it, I remember thinking, oh, here we go. Here's the town square aspect. Here's the kids playing horseshoe and people carrying fruits around. We definitely got the town square, but it was a very like condensed story. We're just following these people along, and the one the one thing that's their one big conflict is the drought. Apparently their planet is dying. Nothing they can I don't know if they could have ever stopped it. They have no power over this thing. They can't fly to the stars. They can't really do anything. They're like pre-warp everything, so they're basically just dying. They're kind of doing superstitions. They're kind of saying like, well, maybe our scientists can plant more trees or figure stuff out. But it's a pretty streamlined story, and it's really easy to follow. It's great. It's different than what we've seen, although it did remind me of a couple things. Like, I think that this is, in a lot of ways, it's TNG's The Visitor in a couple ways. One is
Yeah.
like the time jumps, where like every commercial break, we're now 20 years later or 15 years later, or something like that. But it also reminded me a lot of the episode where Miles O'Brien goes in that prison for like 25 years or something like that. And he comes back and they're like, he was just out for like an hour, and so that almost feels like a more powerful theme of like Picard just lived 30, 40 years, right? And now he has to suddenly snap back to reality. And it's got to be so hard, like snapping back to reality after a week. You know, you go on vacation from work, you come after a week or two or a month, you come back, it kind of takes a while to get readjusted. Imagine being gone from the entire planet for what felt like 40 years. Getting reacquainted must feel so weird and just disconcerting. And they gave us a good moment of that when he finally comes back and he kind of just touches the wall of the bridge, you know. Really good acting there, but there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
There's a lot to this episode.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you mentioned the visitor, and I also thought about the column episode where, you know, he's put in that mental kind of prison where he has to serve that time out. And this does have elements of both of those stories, of the visitor and the other episode. I do see it, parallels. I also see some differences.
Oh, yeah.
And the biggest difference for me, which I thought was a great kind of walk away from this, was, you know, the value or desire that we have to be remembered, right? It's like we talk about our ancestry in some way, so we always try to find ways to connect ourselves to the past, to people who lived before us in the past. When we talk about our ancestry, right? I come from this place, so that's actually identifying with a shared memory of people, right? And so it may not be as specific, but it's still a group of people or an idea that lasted and fought for in this country or this country. And so when you identify that in that kind of a way with a group of people, you're remembering them. You know, you're honoring their existence prior to yours. And I think that was one of the big takeaways for me, was under the circumstances of in extreme annihilation, right? Like where everything is going to be destroyed. This planet is going to supernova, so everything's going to turn into a star, and there will be nothing left of these people. You know, you think about that on our own terms in this world, on this planet that we're inhabiting together, and that's, you start to think, oh, if we were facing that kind of complete extermination or annihilation of just not existing anymore, what would be important for us to leave behind as a memory or a record of our legacy? And,
definitely Three's Company. We'd want people to know about Three's Company. It's a good show.
Yeah, definitely. But you know, it's like then that kind of breaks down what matters in the world. But it's almost, you want everybody to be remembered, because we all have our own network of friends and family and life experiences that we want remembered.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's important.
And is it interesting that the Resicans, you know, these people from Resic or whatever, and that planet, it's interesting what they chose to be remembered. They didn't go about, you know, putting Picard, you know, in the presidential role or something like that, to where then all of their culture is remembered, their different countries, the technologies, all of these, the things that really, where the planet was, what made up the planet, what they wanted him to learn and to teach was just that within the community, the friends, the family, the, you know, the rituals or whatever they had, the traditions, you know, like they really chose kind of small scale, like here's who we were, not our big overview statistics. So it's really interesting what they chose for him to learn about.
Yeah, and then, you know, it's funny because I didn't even think about this until now, but when you reverse it in your head, it was kind of like, almost like the Truman Show, in that everybody kind of knew what was going on, right? I that's kind of what they revealed in the end, was that everybody who was in that opening scene where they're like, you don't remember who you are, and you know what I mean? And
Could be. It could be like, here he comes, everybody. All right, dress rehearsal's over. This is the real deal. Here we go. But, it could also just be a program where they all are believing it and real until that very last chapter. Then that last chapter is programmed as the big reveal where they get the standing ovation for their performance.
Yeah, it could be both ways. But yeah, it made me think and the reason I say that is because from the dialogue that was given between Picard and the other council leader who came to visit, when Picard suggested a water reclamation project to catch water out of the air, the other guy was like, yeah, okay, we'll consider that. But the way he said that now in hindsight, as you watch the episode, is as if he knew already at that moment there was no way to salvage their existence, right?
It's not going to work, yeah.
Right. So he knew that they were destined to be exterminated, essentially, in that moment. That's why Picard said there will be no. He could read from his tone that idea wasn't going to have legs and wasn't going to materialize. So I'm saying in that way, they did know something in advance prior to him solving the equation of the soil samples, and you know what I mean? And then mapping the stars and whatever he was doing to figure out what he was figuring out. They already knew from the time that conversation happened, in my kind of hindsight reflection. It's not obvious, but it feels like that.
Here's the crazy part is a lot of Star Trek fans consider this to be the best Star Trek episode. A lot. Or the best Next Generation episode, or their favorite episode. But this is a big, big, big one in the whole Star Trek universe. And it kind of makes me wonder why. Like, what is it about this episode that makes people say, no, this is number one? Because, there wasn't a ton to it. So I think what it is just how it made them feel at the end there, that because it gives you a feeling. You definitely feel something beautiful when Bataille comes back and he's alive again and they explain what the situation is. And you get it, and you're like, wow, this is an entire race that has been gone for 1,000 years. And they did everything they could just to make sure one person would know who they are. And I'm that one person that got to live a life in their world. There's just that beautiful moment. And I think that's what it is. I think it's just how the episode makes you feel. And it definitely makes you feel something.
Yeah, it makes you feel something for sure. I definitely got teary-eyed, I have to admit.
It hits you. Yeah.
It did hit me. I did get close to the wife in particular, who I thought was fantastic in this episode. She did a great job with her performance. She just seemed so loving and just a good partner for him.
The best shoe putter awayer ever,
Yeah, but just like, the comforts that she brought to him, like no matter how ridiculous he sounded or acted, she always had a comforting, supportive tone to her approach. And I thought that she was excellent in this role. And then so much so that as they grow older together, I really kind of enjoyed their back and forth. I enjoyed their chemistry. I enjoyed their relationship. And so, that's one thing that this episode also did very well. You mentioned selling the idea of falling in love in one episode, and who is this person? They just came on, and now I'm supposed to believe that they're madly in love. And I actually believed that in this episode because Picard was so resistant in the beginning, and the way it played out, and his kind of perpetuity of existing in this particular mindset or fantasy that he was in a program. So yeah, I thought the actor that played his wife, Eileen, was it?
Yeah.
Eileen?
Mhm.
Yeah, she was amazing. I really enjoyed her.
I thought so too. She was great, very likable, charming. I was just pulling up Peter Allen Fields because I was like, I think this dude had a few pretty good ones. He has writing credits on Duet. He wrote the script for Duet, which is way up there.
Way up there, yeah.
And then a bunch of other Next Generation, or sorry, Deep Space Nine episodes. He did 11 of them. For the Uniform was a good one. In the Pale Moonlight, he did the story by. So that's another. He's got a few tip top episodes. The Dogs of War.
like nines or above.
Yeah,
actually.
Yeah, so
above nines.
So probably his biggest episodes are this one, Duet, and In the Pale Moonlight. But those are three, top 5, top 10 episodes? You know what I mean? Like, that's pretty gigantic, you know?
It's pretty gigantic that he has put up those kind of high numbers for his, impact and touch on this this show, this franchise. Yeah, I mean, I really love to see Nurse Ogawa in this. I thought I thought she was really good.
I feel like every time we see her, you go like, I don't know what it is, but you go, yay, it's an Ogawa episode. Like, here's kind of like how you feel with O'Brien. You're like, yes, here, this is great. It feels
especially when she's given something critical to do and she's involved in the scene heavily, not just as a background filler,
not just going, yes, doctor. Yeah.
Yes. And in this particular back and forth, she looked like they triaging Picard right on the spot. And, they didn't take him to sick bay. They left him right there on the, and they have their medical equipment in front of them, which I also loved as far as props are concerned. I don't think props get enough love on this show.
You don't think props get enough props?
Yeah. Props need more props because they're just, they're handling some really cool looking gadgets. And I remember them, debriefing us before we would go on to shoot. And they would hand us whatever tricorder or whatever it was, and they'd say, "Turn it on like this, flip it like this," and just talking to it like this, or whatever the instructions were of that particular device that you were holding. Carry it like this. This is the thing. You would read the vital signs like this. Props and the prop department guys would come up and say something like that, and they always had the coolest gadgets that lit up and. They were also in charge of the phasers and basically any kind of prop that you were carrying on your person was theirs. And
were they ever a little extra tough about like how fragile it was, or were they usually made pretty well? Were they ever like, don't push too hard on this, or were they made pretty solidly to where they're like, just do whatever you want?
Yeah, most stuff was made pretty solidly. They would, if something was sensitive, they let you know that. Usually they had duplicates of things, so it wasn't just one. But I remember going to the prop department when, they had a little storage closet on the set. And they also had prop guns in there, like regular, revolvers and old school guns. So I'd go in there and just kind of take a look at those prop guns on the set.
What were those from?
Just any kind of throwback episode. Let's say they did like a private investigation. What's his name? The private.
Oh, Dix. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So they'd have guns for those kinds of episodes, and let's say Far Beyond the Stars, for example, the cops coming in there. They carried guns, so there would be a reason to have it on throwback episodes, throwback scenes.
Well, we're going to jump to our break in just a second here, but I do have a point that I thought about you specifically, and it's not necessarily good. All
right.
I have a couple other, points that it will be fun to discuss. So we'll get to those on the other side, including what I thought was like the best moment. We'll be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Sirach, Star Trek fan Lofton.
There I am.
Cool sweater. All right. Here are the trivioids of the week, everybody. The Enterprise encounters a probe that is composed of pericium and talgonite, a ceramic alloy. Kamen has had a high fever for 3 days. Council leader Bataille plants a sapling in defiance of the drought. Captain Picard finds himself in the community of Resic in the northern province of Catan. Picard believes one can't be hungry, thirsty, and exhausted in a dream. Kamen is the best iron weaver in the community. Kamen wants to build atmospheric condensers. Kamen built a telescope in a laboratory, and Maribor is her father's daughter. All right, so there was a point, Sirach, where I thought, maybe I think it was, okay, I'll tell you where it was. It was maybe 15 or so minutes in, maybe 20, and Picard first picks up, or he's got his flute, and he has his friend visiting Bataille, and they're sitting outside, and Bataille says, "You've been brooding behind that flute all night." And he says, "I'm not brooding. I'm immersed in my music." And I felt like right then, I thought of you. I was like, Sirach's probably thinking like, this episode's boring. Like, is this, we're like getting close to halfway into the episode. And so far, he's literally just hanging out with people because, like, we understand what the conflict is on the ship. They're trying to revive Picard and he's tethered to it. But on the planet, there's very little personal conflict for Picard. Very, very, very little. You know, and it really only hits towards the end. So I was wondering, like, was there a point where you're like, I don't know what they're talking about. This episode ain't that great. It's not, it's okay.
Yeah, I'll say this. There was a point when I didn't get that he was aging right away. Like they didn't say 5 years later.
Right. No, they sure didn't make it obvious. No.
Yeah. And I was just like, why is his hair so messy? Like, I was like, wasn't this, it's like, this was yesterday. And all of a sudden his hair got longer and a little bit more messy. And I was like, what's going on here? Like, is this, you know, so I didn't register right away that he was aging. So then I was like, why is he just chilling and, you know, relaxing? And, you know, like, isn't he trying to get out of here still, you know? And so it took me a second to register that, oh, they're playing time is passing and he has just accepted that he can't leave this planet and there's no way to save him.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started to say, okay, so this is not going where I think it's going. I don't, you know, Picard saves the day, he points at his ship. It's like, that's my ship right there.
Yeah.
You know, it's well, not yeah, one I mean, those.
He was trying, but there wasn't much to it. Like, remember, there was that one point where they kind of hinted at it, where he's like, oh no, I'm just building this telescope to monitor the sun's readings for the drought. And she's like, or maybe you're still looking for that ship of yours or something. He's like, what? Yeah. Well, maybe. I mean, I guess maybe that's also a
if
thing.
I happen to see it, you know, I'm. Yeah, so I thought that was pretty good. You know, yeah, I didn't really think it was slow based on one thing really alone, and that is Picard, Patrick Stewart's performance. I thought was pretty standout. When he's in the bedroom or house, and she says, "I'm going to fix some food for you," and the way he's holding the bowl, the way he's eating, and the way he delivers a line like, "This is delicious," like he sold me that he was not, you know, that he was in a foreign place, that he wasn't expecting even the food he wasn't even expecting the food to be good. There was you know, then even when he says, look, I'm going to ask some crazy questions, but I just need you to answer, you know, I thought he gave a great performance in this episode. And that's why I was kind of not saying this is moving too slow or boring because Patrick Stewart was carrying it a lot.
Yeah. In that moment where he was eating the soup, one of the good aspects of his performance was that he wasn't getting comfortable. You could tell in his mind, he's like, I'm only here for a minute.
I'm out of here. I'm
Yeah.
out of here.
I'm not gonna. He didn't sit down at the dinner table. He just sat on like a stool or whatever it was, and he just kind of grabs the soup and holds it. And he's just kind of like just. It was like a quickie. It was like, okay, I'm hungry, real quick. Don't get comfortable. I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna be on my way out. Nice meeting you. Really appreciate it. Is this you, Q? I don't know what's going on, but he was very like I'm on my way out. I'm not. It's like if somebody comes over but they don't sit down. They're like, I'm just dropping this thing off, bro, and then I'm out. Don't get too close.
And in that scene, Eileen says to him, "How are you feeling?" And he's like, "Hungry, thirsty, exhausted. I guess this is not a dream."
Yeah, he's a little rough with her. Yeah,
he was rough with her, and then she said, "Well, this is." He's like, "Where am I? What's going on?" And she's like, "This is your life. This is where you live. This is your life." And he snapped at her and said, "This is not my life." And he turned on his angry Picard for a second, which I love seeing glimpses of because I think it's powerful when he gets into that mode. He doesn't exercise it a lot, but it does have power to it. And I also thought that Patrick was in good shape. I don't know, physically, he looked physically
fit. He kind of had these ripped guns. He had like a vein that was coming down there. I was like, hey, Picard got ripped in his 50s, man.
Yeah, he looked physically fit. I was like, oh, okay, this guy's ready to take a shirt off type moment. Like, he's okay with it. Yeah. He's got his guns out. So
when they're on set and she's like, hey, come to bed. He's like, is this where I take my shirt off, number one? And they're like, no. Director's like, no, you actually keep your shirt on through what about no, the whole episode. You actually, sorry, He's like, maybe we could add a scene. I don't know. No.
What if I roll my sleeves up? Yeah, okay, you can roll your sleeves up.
Just wait till you see First Contact, the movie. Then you see the guns out. That's for sure.
Yeah, I thought that the council leader Bataille, I liked him. I thought he was great. He started off with a really funny line when Picard says to him, "What is your name?" And he's like, "Bro, I'm your friend. I'm Bataille." And he's like, "Oh, all right, okay." And he says, "And who's that lady that I was with?" He's like, "Your wife, Aline." He's like, "If you don't remember her, then I don't think it's not safe to go home." That was a great.
That's a good line. Yes, it was. you better just have a poker night, bro. But a good line that she said too when she gave him the soup. He says it's delicious. She goes, "You always say that." I'm like, that is such a Star Trek thing to say. Like they literally just arrived somewhere and they're like, "But this is your whole life." He's like, "No, it's not." And she's like, "Oh, you always." That is such a Kamen thing to say. Oh, Kamen, you and your rascally antics. And then he talks about the voice. She said the voice transit conductor, I guess, is like their telephone. And he's like, and then she says, "You have to wait until tomorrow." I'm like, what kind of shit town is this? You have to wait till tomorrow to use the phone? Oh.
Yeah.
And they're gonna program something to like zap a guy in 1,000 years. They definitely made some advancements. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, and you know what? Advancements were made on Picard's side because, as we saw in the episode, he started off with the reluctancy. He started off like, "This is not my life." He started off like, "Hey, bro, I'll be out of here real soon.
Mm-hmm.
I'll fix your little drought thing. Here's a suggestion, but until I'm out, that's all I got for you right now." And so yeah, and then you start to see him really become involved in the community, feeling like he was a part. And I think that's another line that the Bataille character said that I really liked. And that's when he said, "For the first time, you're speaking like you're truly a member of the community." And I thought, how important it is that when we talk about things or people or the world in general, is to speak from the perspective as being a member of the community.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, the member of the community of humankind, and so I think, that kind of resonated with me in Bataille's words. I like the way that was written.
You know what I thought was the best moment of this episode, actually? I mean, the one that, made me feel something was, when Bataille returns and they all kind of tell him what the story is, and we get it really quickly. We get it real fast. But it's when it's actually this one behind me. It's when he gets back on the ship, Riker brings him the flute, and he grabs the flute and he just pulls it in and holds it tight. And it's such a beautiful moment where he's showing some vulnerability there too, where it's just like, I don't know, just the way he's holding it is just feels like this is so precious to me. This is literally the only thing other than my memory that's left of this entire civilization. And it's like his touchstone into that. So for the rest of his life, he has this thing that when he holds it or when he plays it or when he looks at it, it takes him back to that place. And I thought that was such a good addition. Whoever added that at the end there, whoever came up with that moment, that to me is like, that was the deal sealer of this being a great episode, because, and Picard's performance there, the way he holds it, like you really feel how precious that thing is to him.
Yeah, and Riker presents it to him and walks away, and I thought that was, a nice moment between the two of them. But yes, the scene that moved me where I had tears was when he's on the deathbed. His wife's on the deathbed, and and you can see he had actually fallen in love with her, and they built this family together. He had grandchildren. The way she went out was in a way that was trying to be easy on him too. Like she didn't want to put any kind of burden on him on that transition, so she was very soft about it. The put your shoes on, put your shoes away line.
Yeah, that was the line. Yeah.
And Picard's face, I mean, he killed it in his reaction on watching her pass away in front of him. I thought that was a very crucial moment for this episode. And the other moment was when he does have that kind of realization that this whole thing is designed to make him remember them. And he says, I'm the someone. He has that moment where he's like, I'm the someone. And I thought Picard delivered that as good as you can. And then he went on to say, I'm the one it finds, and so he's having this kind of moment where it's like, holy crap, I thought I was stuck on this planet and, living this life for years and building this family. And all of this was meant to teach me about you guys, and then he sees that his friends weren't lost and dead, and that his wife wasn't dead. The look on his face when he sees her too, by the way.
Yeah.
Classic. So he just killed this episode. Patrick Stewart really took advantage of every opportunity to win the performance in this episode.
Yeah, he really ate it up. I'm sure when he read the script, he was like, all right, time to teach a clinic here. All right, let's go.
Yeah.
I got this one. I'm going to rest well. I got a big week ahead of me. I'm sure he was so up for the challenge and excited about it. Could be wrong, but that's what I think. When the lady Aline was on her deathbed, there's definitely a plus and minus to me. One, the plus is when she says, remember, put your shoes away. Beautiful, perfect, nailed it. Minus was when she says to her son, let me talk to my husband. And he leaves. And she dies. So the kid is like, I mean, think of this. Your mom, it got sick and suddenly she's not doing well. And you're like, oh, and she's like, let me talk to my husband. And you're like, okay, I'll just go wait outside, Mom. Let me know if you need anything. You go wait outside. And then a couple minutes later, Dad says, all right, come back in now. And he's like, okay, cool. And he's like, your mother's dead, by the way. Wait, what? She told me to just wait outside for a minute so that I could lose the opportunity to see her in her last moment. It was just like the rudest thing. I was like, she told him to leave and didn't even give him the opportunity to come back and say goodbye or anything. I was like, that was cold, man.
Yeah, I mean, she could have just said, "Come here," and gave him a kiss on the forehead type thing, and said, "I love you. Go wait outside." Because the "I love you" moment would have been there. You know, at least she
Mhm.
would have. That would have been part of her last words to him.
But that dude just thought that he was going outside for a couple minutes and then come back in with the glass of water for her and say, "What else do you need, Mom?" You know, maybe. But no, she was like, "No, that's it. See ya."
I mean, it didn't bother me that much because I did know that the thing was set up for that moment with him.
Mhm.
To make him to see how much he cares, to see how much he has invested in these people and this story, and I was okay with it.
Plus, they only have
Um,
43 minutes to tell this entire story. So I get it. I understand why it was like
yeah,
that. They had to they got to
yeah,
fly through an entire lifetime in 43 minutes. So yeah, I get it. But it was just funny.
yeah. But I really did like the moment where this is what felt like the visitor to me when he's sitting down with his daughter Maribor, and he tells her, seize the time, Maribor. Now will never come again. It felt like Cisco saying to Jake, like, let go of this and that and just live your life and be happy and, enjoy your life, basically. Seize the time, seize the moment, and stop, don't focus on on the worst outcomes. So I like that as well.
Yeah, lots to like in this episode. We have a few more minutes, and I've got a few more notes to knock out. There was when their son, Baby Batai, was growing up, and you could hear him off in the distance playing the flute, and she's like, "Oh, he's playing the flute or something like that." He was playing like the Inner Light theme song, which was nice, and also
Yeah.
that tune that he was playing, that was part of the Star Trek Picard theme. So you didn't recognize it at the time, obviously, because you hadn't seen this episode. But the fans that had seen this episode, inside the Star Trek Picard season 1 theme, it was kind of based off of this. You could hear that flute, that Resican flute playing in the theme, and
Oh,
that's what makes it so beautiful. Like that was almost like his big crowning moment in a lot of ways. So that was in the Picard theme song, which was beautiful.
wow.
Um, yeah, it's really cool. I will say when Picard wakes up on the bridge was the first time in my life that I was like, wow, Picard looks young. because I was used to being all struck
Yeah.
in just like 37 minutes
Yeah.
of watching Picard get older and older. When it showed him again as, 52-year-old Patrick Stewart on the floor of the bridge getting up, I
Yeah.
was like, wow, he looks
He looks young.
great. He looks terrific.
He did. And like I said, he looked physically fit in the beginning, and then,
Yeah.
when they cut back to him with the short hair and, not aged, it's like, you're looking good right now,
Yeah.
man. So,
Yeah. Keep doing
yeah,
what you're doing.
yeah. Um, one of the things that I thought about when I was watching this episode was something that I remember learning about taking my daughter to an exhibit at the museum.
Hmm.
And we went to go see King Tut and the King Tut's, display of, his sarcophagus and all of his headdresses and all of the stuff that are involved with the King Tut exhibit. But one of the things was the Book of the Dead. And so I believe that was the name of the exhibit itself. It
The
was like King Tut.
Necronomicon? Or is that what it's called?
No, there's this. I'm not sure if that's what it's called, but it's the Egyptian Book of the Dead. And one of the things that I remember that stuck with me on that, and this is what it's one of their principles in this book, and that is that no one truly dies until their name is spoken for the last time. Right.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So that's the Egyptian philosophy of life, essentially, or death.
Is that
And
you
that is that,
continue on as long as people talk about you, remember you, mention your name. Mm-hmm.
yes. Yes.
It's a very
Eh,
similar thing to. Sorry, go ahead. Finish. Sorry, I didn't.
no, 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 no. Keep
There's a
going.
very similar theme in the Disney's movie Coco, which is like the Day of the Dead in Hispanic cultures, where they're like, hey, as long as we remember them and we honor them, then they're still alive. And it's a really beautiful movie, actually. Coco, I don't think it got the love that it deserved, and the trailer that they cut was kind of misleading. Like when I saw the trailer, I was like, this doesn't look great. But the movie itself, I ended up seeing it, was great. And it basically covers that beautiful movie. I recommend that you see it if you have not.
Yeah. And so that's also one of the ancient Egyptian principles that you'll find. And, I think that when you think about people that have lived that we still talk about to this day, that, just thousands of years ago,
Yep.
people that lived, and we still talk about them. And as their names continue to resonate, then their life essentially goes on,
Mm-hmm. And that's what I was thinking in the year 2750, when people are watching this old ass episode that's like 700 years old of Sirach and Ryan talking about that. We'll still be alive. They'll be writing down they'll be like, dude, these dad jokes from the 21st century slap, man. These still slap, man, in the 28th century.
Oh yeah, I don't know about that, but yeah, I think that's a great philosophy that was kind of touched upon in this
Beautiful.
episode. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, as long as we're remembered by you, and you have you speak us into existence, then boom, we're still in the game. So I think that took a little bit of that principle and applied it to this episode.
Absolutely. Excellent point for sure. Home run of the day. Speaking of slaps, who's going to slap it out of the park here? Who gets the home run of today's episode?
Yeah. Overall, love the idea. So the writers, I just feel like, came up with a great concept. But dialogue wise, there aren't any lines that just jump out at me as like, this is such good knowledge and wisdom to hold on to. It's just they're very well delivered, and so then I'm going to have to say the performance will be the thing that wins the day for me, and I have to give the home run to Sir Patrick Stewart, who was just phenomenal in this episode to me, with a very close runner-up of his wife. Forgive me for not knowing her name, but I just really love the chemistry between them. There was something that about her that reminded me, and I might get flack for this, but remind me of like Kate Mulgrew for some reason, and I don't know why.
Interesting.
But
yeah, the actress's name is Margot Rose. Margot Rose.
Yeah, Margot Rose was fantastic in this, but for sure, without a doubt, it is Patrick Stewart that was the home run hitter of this episode.
Yeah, it was Sir Patrick for sure. Now, obviously, an actor can only do as well as what's on the page a lot of times, but so the writers get a lot of credit for that. But Sir Patrick definitely did what he did and brought it to another level. Also, very close behind him, honestly, to me, was the director, who was, I already forgot, Peter Lorre, because I feel like this was a tough episode to direct. Not technically, but because they crammed so much time and it needs to make sense. And, sometimes people don't know. It doesn't say 5 years later, does it? There's all these things that happen. We need to be able to pick up on it quickly. And a lot of that is how you present it. And how that one scene was presented where Bataille comes back to life and what's her name? Eileen comes back to life and all this. That was presented in such a perfect way, I thought. That's directing. And so a really close second is the director. I thought it was, I don't think people get a lot of credit for an episode that's not really flashy. They get credit for interesting camera angles and, space battles. But I feel like this one was really good. Okay.
Yeah.
Here
and I love that last shot that he ended on with Picard in that study in his own study. I just like
playing his little flute. So cute. Here are other people that love to study. Dr. Anne-Marie Siegel, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackman, Tom TJ, Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Titus Muller, Dr. Muhammad Noor, Anil O, Palat, Joe Balsarati, Mike Gu, and Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, Matt Boardman, that's the Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Jake Barrett, cool guy, Henry Unger, Allison Leach Hyde, Julie Manasfi, Jed Thompson, Dr. Susan V. Gruner, Glenn Iverson, Dave Gregory, Chris Sternett, Greg K. Wickstrom, Cassandra Gerard, Chuck A., Chris Garris, and of course, Jason M. Oaken. All right, everybody. Oakenshield. Thorin Oakenshield. That's a character in The Hobbit. All right, everybody, stick around. We've got the free-for-all up next. We'll be right back on the 7th Rule. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the 7th Rule with Sirach, Star Trek fan Lofton. This is the free-for-all with Melissa Longo and her parrot. Kind of. Jason M. Oaken is here as well.
Hi, everybody.
Faith Howell is here on the bridge of the Enterprise D with her, looks like Captain No. There it is. Chuck A is here as well. I see J.G. Hertzler behind you. And Eve England is out in Wales. Welcome back. Steve Case, a.k.a. Joe Bugbuster, is back as well. Welcome back. Allison Leach Hyde is wearing some Abyssinian kiosk goodies. TJ Jackson Bay is also on the bridge of the Enterprise D.
West Side.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Greg Kenzo,
Oh, yeah.
colorful shirt. Dinosaurs. Cool. Carrie Schwent is wearing her Captain Dathon shirt, Darmok. Chris Garris is here as well. He's got the show right behind him. The Matt Boardman has a Reskin flute behind him. And the Dark Lord, Chris McGee, has a Stembolt and Chill shirt on. Thank goodness for that. Jake Cisco guesses the IMDb score. Face like you
I'm
better.
going to say probably like a 9-2.
9-2. Wow. Does anybody else have any guesses that doesn't already know?
7.1.
9.5.
Whoa, what did you say, Eve? What?
Oh, Eve coming in hot.
Swinging.
Whoa.
9.25
This is
now.
going to be fun.
Did I hear
9.0.
7.5?
9.5.
9.25.
Oh, no.
I was joking.
Okay.
9. How about a solid 9?
I know what
9.
it is, so I'm not going to vote.
Faith says she believes on IMDb it's a 10.
9.7.
9 point what?
7.
Wow, 9.7.
Wow.
And
What'd
Eve
Chuck
England,
say?
you said 7.1 optimistically?
Maybe I watched the wrong episode.
I think
Oh.
It was the inner light. Did you watch the inner light?
You did,
Does
yeah.
it look
Okay,
like
cool.
this behind me?
Yes.
All right, I think all bets are in. The correct answer is 9.4.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Wow.
I think that's
Eve
what
is
Chuck
like-
said.
I definitely watched the wrong episode.
Let's watch it again.
All right. Did we have any non-appearance mentions? I didn't hear any. Okay. What about some kind of or some sort of? I feel like they ran into one, right?
They ran into exactly one. Data speaking in the very second line of the episode says, it appears to be a probe of some kind.
Nice. Nice. You kind of said it in the Yoda way.
Yes.
All right. Melissa Longo, will you please get us started off on the right track by telling us what you thought of this Next Generation episode?
Very shaka, very shaka. I was right. He did play that tune in this episode, and I was told I was wrong. So there, I was right. I did hear it in this episode. But this episode I really enjoyed it a lot, for many reasons. And I will say that it brought me to tears. The ending brought me to tears because I don't know, maybe I get emotional when I think of entire civilizations being wiped out in maybe preventable ways. I don't know. I don't know. He spent all this time with his family, and yeah, I'm assuming he took the place of somebody who actually existed in that village. And so all of those children and all of those grandchildren and all of the people, Batai, and I don't know, it's just, to me, it's heartbreaking when that all of that is gone. All of that is gone, and that's heartbreaking. I love the difference in tone when Picard is on Catan, living his life, and on the Enterprise, because when they're on the Enterprise, there is this heightened sense of urgency, and I believe it. And I love the way that Riker holds on to Picard when he collapses, and he's like, "You're okay," and he's so tender with Picard. I don't know. It's like you don't see that side of Riker very often. And then when Beverly's attending him and she's putting her hand on his head, that is so tender as well. And it's good to see how much these people, his crew, love him. And I will leave it at Patrick Stewart is a phenomenal actor. And his end scene when he learns that the probe is for me, and he's like, "Oh, it's for me." The surprise on his face and in his voice, and that got me too. I was like, "Oh my gosh," and I'm gonna tear up now. But it was just so beautiful. It was really a beautiful moment. I really enjoyed this, and I'm not gonna tear up, but I really enjoyed this episode. Sorry.
Great stuff. Not at all. We love it. Everybody cried in this episode except for Eve. And I saw Jason M. Oken post on social media that this was the 17th time he's cried for this episode. But thanks very much, Melissa Longo. All right, Jason Oken, what do you think of this one?
Well, you were wrong. It was the 18th time.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you have to get your math right, especially about the Inner Light. Certainly one of the most spoken about episodes of The Next Generation, mostly because of its emotional impact. I guess at some level, Deep Space has the Visitor, and The Next Generation has the Inner Light. I guess on an emotional level, those are kind of comparable episodes, completely different stories, obviously, but also kind of an unlived life that sort of permeates both. And I think, as Melissa said, a lot of this holds up by the performances, and I think Patrick's performance, especially as the old man at the end, is just wonderful. I think Margot Rose is wonderful as Aline. I think she does a wonderful job playing the character, kind of a fully realized character, even though she's not on screen all that much. It's a beautifully written episode. It reads really, really well. And it's just, again, it gives you a kind of an unusual science fiction concept, or at least, unusual for the times. Star Trek has come back to it, and Deep Space and Hard Time. Actually, Margot Rose was in Hard Time as well. It comes back not so well on Voyager in Ex Post Facto and in Memorial and in Remember. So they've used the sort of same concept over and over again. But here it's just done wonderfully, and it's kind of an unforgettable hour, certainly, of The Next Generation, and something that stands out to all of us. I think musically, it's one of the better episodes of the latter seasons, which is a little bit unusual now that certain composers are no longer sort of working on the show. There are a lot more things to say about this, and maybe I'll be a contrarian and I'll say a few things that perhaps are not quite what people are thinking. So I'll save that for later.
Wow, great stuff. That's two people in a row that loved the music. Melissa loved Frere Jacques. Thanks very much, Jason M. Oken. All right, Faith Howell, you love this season. This has to be one of the reasons you love this season so much, right?
Yes. However,
Oh.
if I'm going to skip an episode this season, it's going to be this one. And it is not at all because it is not a fabulous episode. It just, as Melissa said, like as I watched it just wrapped up 30 seconds before we hopped on, and the tears are still like right here. Okay. So it pulls the heartstrings. You got to be in the right mood for this episode for sure.
Yes.
And definitely there's like layers, right? So as a kid, I didn't necessarily go on the whole emotional life journey like I do now. But there definitely is a little bit of terror in what could happen to our earth. It is us, right? It is concerns that we have today and continue to have. And the older I get, I can't speak for all of you guys, but the more concerned I get in the same way. Like, it's shocking to me how fast I'm seeing things develop. And, it seemed like science fiction when I saw it on this episode when I was 6, but now it's ever more real. And, as it wrapped up, that the scene, with the grandson and things like that, we care about our people. We want our descendants to continue to have safe and healthy lives into eternity, right? And so this episode kind of stings in the right ways, but also it makes it difficult to jump in and fully just enjoy a light, enjoyable Trek episode. So I will wrap up by saying I hope that maybe Carrie will back me up on this. The tune that Picard plays on the flute at the end reminds me a lot of the Outlander theme.
You are correct.
And so I was jamming today.
I did not see that comment coming. Thanks very much. I'll appreciate it. Good stuff. All right, Chuck A, aka TNG Fanatic. What do you think of this episode? So or what?
Well, it's such a wonderful episode. Had the kind of slow start to figure out what was going on with the probe, but Patrick Stewart was just wonderful in the episode. And as the episode progressed, he got better and better, if that's possible, as Kamen. He showed so many emotions and got to kind of live with the life he has now. The Daniel Stewart played young Bataille, who was Patrick Stewart's actual son, in this episode. And there was or at least two others that I know of that wound up being in other Star Trek Ventures series. Richard Reel, who played Bataille, was in a Voyager, I think 2 Voyager episodes. Mm-hmm. And Scott Jake, he wound up being Commander Cavett in Caretaker in Voyager.
No way.
He had,
wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So one thing I do remember from conventions at Star Trek Las Vegas, I didn't get to see the panel, but Margot Rose and Patrick Stewart did a panel talking about this episode. If anybody wants to look it up, I saw it on YouTube. It was a little really nice interaction between the two of them on the panel. Yeah, this was just such a wonderful episode, and the script was just awesome. One of my favorite episodes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll check out that interview. Thanks very much, Chuck A. I mean, after this recording. Appreciate it. Eve England is out in Wales, and I'm dying to know what you think of this episode. only second to Sirach, because you also haven't seen this episode before. It's brand new to you. You thought it was a 7 at best. What'd you think?
Okay, you got to hear me out, because I did agree with what everyone just said, but I have to I was a bit conflicted. So I was watching it and I was just so bored for most of the episode. I was like, where is this going? Didn't understand what was, because you don't find out that, what's actually happened until that sort of last bit. And I agree that last scene with Picard in his room with the flute was just incredibly powerful. And I thought that was amazing. But I couldn't get over, it was just the most creepy, horrible episode I've ever seen. It was just, I can't believe that those people did that to Picard. Why not just leave like a time capsule? Why put somebody through decades of living a life that's just completely not real, and then to just dump him back where he was 25 minutes later? And I just couldn't help feel just incredibly sad for him, but probably not for the same reasons everybody else was. But I thought, this guy has gone through so much. He's already been kidnapped by the Borg already, and the trauma, how long that took him to get over that situation. And then I was thinking, we're not even going to see, well, I mean, I might be wrong, but I was thinking I'm not going to see any more of how this changes Picard, because that would have fundamentally changed him, having gone through all of that. And then to have to sort of come back. And I know they sort of picked on it and they made a couple of points around that. It was kind of obviously he was having to deal with it, but I assume that we just move on at next episode and they don't really talk about it. And I just feel, I don't know, that's, in DS9 with, Chief O'Brien, you get a sense of that impact and the ongoing impact on him. But I'm starting to feel that Picard is actually the original O'Brien must suffer person, because it's pretty awful what he has to go through. And I completely agree. Everything that everyone else said, it was beautiful. All that sort of points about climate change is really, but to me, I just couldn't get over the fact that these people chose to do that. And I just couldn't get past that. I was like, that kind of ruined that sort of emotional aspect to me, because it kind of added a sort of cruelty and a sort of a sinister aspect to it, because it just didn't seem to be necessary to do it that way. So yeah, that's why I give it a low score, because I thought it was a really interesting sci-fi concept, but I didn't think that's where they were going with it. They were going for more of the emotional aspect rather than the fact that this is a really creepy idea.
Thanks very much, Eve England out in Wales. The Inner Light, creepy episode. All right, Steve Case.
Cool.
Welcome back, Joe Bugbuster. What'd you think of this one?
Great to be back. And I did my rewatch last night, so no more tears. When I first remembered what episode this was going to be, I thought of the flute, of course, and all the memes that go along with that. And I kind of set me off a little bit. And then I remembered a couple episodes with women that Picard had deep feelings for, and he had to let them go because of his role as a Starfleet captain, including one a few weeks ago about that. But this episode wasn't really like either of those either. Once I started watching, I remembered how wonderful the episode is, letting Picard experience marriage and raising children and a simpler life. And I understand this is also Patrick Stewart's favorite episode, understandably. I enjoyed his transition from hostility to suspicion to acceptance to embracing his growing family. And I thought those are actually the same steps that we go through with death also. It was like death of his self and moving into this whole new life. And then that moment when he says he wants her permission to build something, a nursery. Okay, then we went all Little House on the Prairie. That was and then it was poetic that that the flute was left on the probe, and then the way that he held the flute to his chest and still knew how to play it and remembered everything. So I've got some things left unsaid, but I really like this episode.
Very nice. Awesome. Little House on the Prairie. Thanks very much, Steve Case. All right, Allison Leach Hyde, you've seen this episode before, right? What'd you think of it?
Quite a few times. I agree that you have to be in the mood for this episode. I was like planned my night last night. I'm like, I'm gonna watch it tonight. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm watching it tomorrow. I need something happy. I'm not gonna watch this one. So I did change for that. And yeah, it's because it makes me cry. Especially the end, that last, not the last, well, also the last scene, but the last scene with the people of Catan, where, you know, they're like, like bringing him back to himself, like easing that transition. Again, I mean, it's a 25-minute thing that happened, but they're easing his transition to like, actually, no, this isn't who you are, but we wanted you to experience what we were like. And it's been 1,000 years. And so we're gone, but talk about us. It's up to you now. I'm like, oh, that's heartbreaking and horrifying. That I do agree with Eve that is a horrifying way of teaching somebody about your culture, is sending out a probe to volunteer you to learn this. Like, he didn't volunteer to learn. So yeah, that is a little creepy, but it is beautiful. And it's not just beautifully written. The costumes were beautiful. The makeup was very well done. Of course, Michael Westmore always does a great job. And I love that, you know, Picard got to experience the life of an artist, but he still was a scientist. And yeah, so it's a beautiful episode. My favorite scene is actually when he's talking with his adult daughter. And, you know, he's like, live in the now. Now is the only time you have. When she's like, well, I should get married sooner rather than later. He's like, yes, go do it now. Because we don't know how long we have. And that's true whether our sun is going supernova or not. So I love this episode, but I do have to be in the mood for it. And one fun little thing during a production meeting of this particular episode, the drawings for Deep Space Nine were on the script by Steinbeck. He was working on them during the meeting, doodling on his script.
Wow, that's cool.
Nice.
All right. Thanks very much, Allison Leach-Hyde. Definitely have to be ready for this episode. Thanks very much. TJ Jackson Bay is ready for any episode, anytime. What do you think of this one?
I think like Allison and Faith, I do have to be. I have to have my mind set to watch this episode. It's not something I would just flip on like, oh, the inner light's on, I'll watch it. Like, no, I have to mentally prepare for it as well. For all the reasons that have been said. So yeah, this episode, it's kind of meh. No, I'm kidding. Incredible, and it gives you so much to think about. And it takes you on a journey, if you're willing to go with Picard. I don't feel any sort of horrific sense in him taking that journey, but I also can see where someone might. But a couple of things that I really appreciated about that journey is again, I think it was Chuck that mentioned how Stewart played it, and that in the beginning you see him just kind of completely rejecting the experience, and then by the time it's complete, he's fully in it. Yes, he remembers being on a ship a long time ago, but he's so far from that he's fully in the life that he's leading on Catan, or Caton, as some people like to say. And I think it was Allison that mentioned his talk with his daughter, and that was actually one of my favorite quotes of the episodes, is when he says, make now always the most precious time. Now will never come again. And I, like Allison, do think that's important, whether or not the sun is going supernova. All we have is now. The past, that's a memory. The future hasn't come yet. But you have now, so you can choose, how you experience now. You can choose, to experience it with happiness, or you can choose to experience it with worry, or any of the range of emotions that are available to us. And all of them are perfectly fine. It's okay to worry, sometimes even appropriate. Sometimes it's okay to be afraid, but it's also just as okay to be happy and joyful and peaceful. And the choice is yours. No one can make that for you, and no one can take that from you. And I think that is just profound and really sums up the episode for me. Another favorite moment I had is when Cayman and Batai are sitting out on the back porch, and I can never remember his wife's name, and that's just terrible. Someone said it earlier. Eileen. Come on, Eileen. Eileen comes out and says, Batai, and he says, yes, ma'am. Go home. Yes, ma'am. He just gets up and goes. I love that moment because it sums up to me, the bond and friendship that they had in that community, and the respect that they have for each other, and just the kind of sense of camaraderie. And that moment stands out to me as well. I think it's poignant that all of this happened in 20 minutes. That means for every minute that passed on the Enterprise, he was living like 2 years. And that's kind of insane. Speaking of that, where was Counselor Troy during all of this? She have sense that all of this was going on, but
counseling
that's
Barkley.
A story for another day, and some things left unsaid. I have plenty of those, by the way. I'll end this, however. Someone else, mentioned the music, but also another very poignant moment for me is that the end closes with the ship flying by and him still playing the flute. And there's, until the end credits, no other fanfare other than just him playing the flute. And if you haven't cried by then, you should, or you don't have a heart.
Thanks very much, TJ Jackson Bay, calling some of us out, I think.
Damn,
great
Eve.
stuff.
Came at you, Eve. Shots fired.
Sorry, Eve.
I was just angry for him. I just didn't like
a firing squad on Eve right now. Thanks very much, TJ. Jackson Bay out in Missouri. Greg Kenzo's in Hawaii. What did you think of this one, Greg?
It was all right. No, I'm just kidding. It's amazing. All right. So the first time I saw this episode was about 10 years ago, and it's one of the few that like really stand out in my mind. So I know that it has had a profound impact on me. Real quick, I just want to note that Picard was the original settler of Catan. Chris was talking about it earlier. Some of you will get that. But yeah, no, I vividly remember the first time I saw this and its profound impact. It didn't affect me as much this time because I've seen it already. I had not heard anything about this episode going in. I wasn't a part of the Star Trek fandom really online or anything. And so I was surprised at how deeply I was affected. It did more than speak about the importance of so much that we take for granted. It imbued its viewers, or at least I felt at the time, that with the message, do not take life for granted. Make the best of the time you have. It's a cliche by now, but it demonstrates, and it also demonstrates the wondrous ability of humans to adapt to any situation they encounter. I remember hitting me hard that Batai had died. It did seem like they kind of glossed over that, but the actor who did that, who I didn't look up because I didn't want to see the IMDb score, did a great job with establishing the chemistry of friendship with Patrick Stewart. Yeah, I've known Batai's. I feel like I've been a Batai, like kind of like a mentor a little bit, but like a friend. Yeah, at the end of the episode, the pause before Picard says "come," like he had forgotten that was his go-to response. That was a nice touch. Yeah, and like TJ said, and it's a bit cliche now, but the philosophy I pulled from this episode, and it bears repeating, it was given by Picard: seize the time, Maribor, live now, make now always the most precious time. Now will never come again. Yeah. And it's become cliche for a reason. Every time I hear it, I realize that I need the reminder desperately. It's easy to forget. And to think, I think I have all the time in the world until I look in the mirror. I'm 5 years older and a little bit wider. You know, it's, yeah. And I think it's serendipitous that Jason mentioned that, the comparisons between this and The Visitor, because the Delta Flyers are actually releasing The Visitor today. So it's like, yeah, both are kind of happening at the same time. Not to promote other podcasts right now, but it's really cool. And it features our man right here. It's Rock. There's also, but yeah, I agree with, now that I've heard Eve, and this is the last point I'll make, it's that, yeah, this is kind of messed up when you think about it like that. There's an episode of Voyager where they take 5 crew members, and I think they're given false memories of both of committing genocide, pretty much, and they're both the perpetrators and the victims. And so, yeah, they kind of take this to the extreme. But yeah, all in all, it was a great episode. First time was amazing. This time it was great, but always remember your first.
Remember the 7th rule.
I'm trying to see. I think Sirach might be doing a panel on The Visitor in Vegas or something like that. I don't want to misspeak. I'd have to relook that up or something like that. I'm not sure. Stay tuned for an answer on that. Thanks very much, Greg Kenzo, out in Hawaii. Carrie Schwent, aka Crafty Bear. What'd you think of this one?
It's keeping on the love bandwagon. There's definitely a reason why it's number one on IMDb's top. You can click on a link and see all the episodes ranked in order of their IMDb scores. Of the top 10, there are only 2 so far that we have not gotten to yet. So I'll call those out once we get to them. But a phrase that sort of popped into my head watching it this time around, and every time I watch it, I cry. I'm a crier. Y'all know me. You've seen me cry. I'm a crier. But this time around, just the phrase that popped into my head was, it's subtly profound. It's got such a nice slow pace to it. I like the breaks in the story to go back to the bridge, and you come back and it's a few years later. I really like how that's paced. So it just kind of sits in your heart and just sort of hangs out there a little bit. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know what I was trying to say there, but I will move on. But my mini gush on the guest stars, older Bataille. Of all of the people I have looked up on IMDb, he now holds the record for the most IMDb acting credits. Not counting the 14 he has under upcoming. He has a grand total of 421 acting credits since he's been acting my entire lifetime, literally. Very, very cool. Love him on Voyager. He is also in a brief scene on an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer that is fantastic. Sadly, of those 400 plus credits, he was not on Dr. Quinn, much to my sadness. Unfortunately. I checked every single one.
I'm sure.
No luck. But young Bataille, and I didn't hear anybody mention this yet, but young Bataille is played by Patrick Stewart's real life son, Daniel. And when you see it, you can see the resemblance. And he only has like 10 or 12 acting credits. He plays his father's son again on a one season series that was on HBO. I think it was called Blunt Talk. Eric liked it. I didn't care. I love Patrick Stewart, but I did not care for that show. But he plays his father's son again in that. And I thought that was very much adorable. Like Michael Westmore, I agree that Patrick Stewart should have won an acting Emmy for this episode. He has apparently gone on record saying that, and I am 100% with him. It was nominated. I don't think it won, though, for Best Makeup. And I did like the progression of the old age makeup on everybody in the so much better than the makeup for too short a season. That stuff was not very good. But I want Eileen's necklace, the little miniature version of the probe that I put sort of hanging out behind me, and I love the tie dye in everybody's clothes. I love tie dye, so I had to have that for my background. But if anybody knows where I can get a version of that necklace, I'd love anything like in miniature. And I thought the probe was super cool, and like the miniature version of it was adorable. Where is it? Oh, yeah. Before I get to the limerick, I have one last thing, and it's the tiniest of nitpicks.
What?
I'm so glad that the bridge has carpet, because if you're going to be laying there for like 25 minutes, laying on carpet is a good thing. But Beverly could have nipped into his ready room and replicated him just a little pillow for under his head, because even for 20 minutes laying on carpet, the back of your head's going to be sore. But like I said, just tiniest of nitpicks. But of course, the limerick for the episode does belong to Picard post probe experience. How to adjust now that I am back home. I had a family, but here I'm alone. All that I met are now gone, but through me they will live on. The probe we found no longer will roam.
Beautiful. Thanks very much. Carrie Schwent, aka Crafty Bear. Greg Kenzo thought about it for a second. He's like, yeah, I'm down with it. Thank you so much. The Matt Boardman's up next, if you can believe it. What do you think of this one?
Well, obviously, I agree with everyone else here. It's a fantastic episode. It's an emotional episode. I don't know. I find myself my brain wandering to other things that relate in some sort of way to the in my life like this, and particularly that end scene with Picard as he's walking around his quarters and kind of reacquainting himself, but there's a sense of loneliness that because he has lived a full life, a whole other life, and now that's gone. And it made me think of times in my life where I've felt a similar way, where whether it's you have family visiting for a time period and then they leave and you're suddenly by yourself again, or as a divorced father having to take my kids and drop them off with their mother, and coming back to an empty apartment. And then, if you'll permit me to be a little cheesy here, but at the end of STLV, when you know that there's no more of the convention, and in some ways, it's almost like you live a lifetime in those 4 days of the convention, and then you go home and you have to say goodbye to all these wonderful faces that I'm looking at right now who make the journey out there, and so I love that these stories have impacts beyond that. And then I'll just one last quick thing, talk about things left unsaid. I loved that very emotional scene where Eileen is dying, and as she's dying, she tells him to remember to pick up his shoes, and it just reminded me of when Gary Hutzel, who was my first VFX supervisor, when he passed away, and Gary, worked on many episodes of Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. We had to go pick up some equipment from his house, and over their couch they had in vinyl, they had on their wall, it says, "Please don't leave me sleeping on the couch," because his wife Kathy would frequently fall asleep on the couch, and it just it's just those sweet tender moments. And that's I think that's what I love about this episode, is that it takes us away from the starships and the aliens and everything like that, and it brings us down to a human level. It tells us just a human story that has a lot of heart.
Absolutely. That was like, man, that was like the line of the episode. Thank you very much. The Matt Boardman, great stuff. Really appreciate that. Chris McGee's like, I don't know, I got one in my bag. But Chris Garris is up next in Southeast Texas. What'd you think of this one?
So usually when I sit down to start watching these, I'll get, my Google Doc up and prepare to start making notes. And I was going to do that during breakfast. And I start watching. It's like, I don't need to take any notes. There's nothing negative to say about this one for the most part. I can't think hardly of anything. It's just a great episode all the way through. I mean, of course, initially when he comes up, he's like, where am I at? He's being the captain. And then, I like how he changes and learns to fall into the society. And it did take me a second when he first said we need to build a nursery. I was thinking like a nursery for like outside for plants and stuff. And then I was like, oh, that type of nursery. And, I loved, there was a line, and I can't exactly remember how the exact quote for it, but when he said, he never, I think it's when they're doing the naming ceremony, he said he never thought kids, would make him whole or something of that nature. And first, again, as who Picard is, he doesn't like kids. And for him to have that large of a character change, it says a lot about him. And of course, Patrick Stewart did just an excellent job at this one. I mean, he says it's his favorite episode that he's ever done for Enterprise. I mean, for Next Gen. I always felt like, Dr. Crusher, one thing I thought is like, she really should have countermanded Riker when they were trying to cut the that probe, because she technically outranks them when it comes to anything medical. So she could have stopped that and not risked that. And of course, Worf always wants to fire something, and he was told no again, as usual. But yeah, it's, and like I said, I hadn't watched it in a long time, but after we got into it, I was like, oh yeah, I remember this one. And it can get emotional at the end. I definitely can do that. And like the song Farrah Jacques, like everything. It just, I didn't really have to make anything, because I just don't really have even any nitpicks or, negative stuff about this one. It's just, as someone said in the chat, and also Ron Moore just thought it was another episode. And it wasn't until after they got done, he's like, oh, this is they had written something. It was just, and so, it's a good one. I definitely, and I think I'm like with some others, it's not one that I just watch. I don't skip it just because it's just, it's one of those ones you just gotta be in the mood to watch, because it doesn't have any action. And it made me wonder for a second if this was almost written as like a slight bottle show, but I don't think so, because they did go. I mean, they had both sets, but they kind of stayed down at the planet for the most part. And the last thing I'm gonna say was I did kind of think it was interesting. He once again had to do with dealt with a sun that was going supernova. Romulans later on, he has to work with them on that, but we see how that goes. But yeah, anyway, it's definitely got that. It earned that 9.4.
Oh yeah, thanks very much, Chris Garris out in Southeast Texas. All right, everybody's dying to know what the sentence, the line of the episode is, but Chris McGee's got a review to give us first. What'd you think of this one, Chris McGee? Did you love it?
Depending on my mood, the best episode of The Next Generation is either The Best of Both Worlds or The Inner Light. It's tough to choose, so I choose both. Anyway, predictably, I echo everyone else's thoughts about this episode, even Eve's. The story is told perfectly and has such an incredibly bittersweet ending that I can never sit through this one without a box of tissues nearby. The only bad thing I can say about this episode is now that we reach what is arguably the pinnacle of the Next Generation, it's all downhill from here. But that's only because this episode sets the bar so sky high that even the best episodes of the last 2 seasons can't possibly compete. And you cannot talk about this episode without including Jay Chataway's incredibly memorable tune played on the Ressican flute. It's about the closest to a #1 Billboard hit that Star Trek gets, besides the theme songs to the shows themselves. It has become so iconic that a 6-minute extended version of the song appears on the album The Best of Star Trek Volume 1 with a full orchestral backing. And of course, I always choke up when that song comes up in my rotation. I did, believe it or not, I found one nitpick with this episode. And that's the shot of Picard on the hill in the first act when he shows that he's empty-handed, but in the reverse angle, you can see a straw hat in his left hand. And I had never noticed that before in all my watchings of this episode. I have more brief observations, but because we have such a packed house here tonight, I'll save them for things left unsaid. So please consider becoming a patron of the Seventh Rule, and I'll see you on the other side. So I'll get to my memorable quote. I've chosen a simple 2-word farewell that I admire from this episode, which appears to be the Catan equivalent of take care, and that is go carefully.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Chris McGee. You guys were looking at a hat in Picard's arm. I was looking at those veiny, badass forearms that dude had. Wow.
Yeah. Oh my God.
These were working out. Yeah,
there they are.
Oh, Captain Gun Show.
Totally.
Catan that way?
10 years.
Okay, maybe too soon, but it gives a whole
How
new
you
meaning to
do it,
Suns Out,
Picard?
Guns Out.
Yeah, that's the one. Sun's out. Oh, rude.
Which way is
Jake's final take.
again?
Yeah, Jake's final take, everybody. Final thoughts?
I like the props, the medical device props that were kind of surrounding Picard while he was being worked on. They look really cool to me. So I just like those medical props. I loved when Nurse Agawa said, "Massive somatophysicial failure." It was a very kind of she was excellent as a nurse in that scene with Beverly. I liked her. Very good moment for her. Turns out Picard can actually love and be in love, but I guess only in a hypothetical, imaginary situation. So, under normal circumstances, he would totally not be able to allow himself to love this much, I think. My other point is I really loved the look on Elaine's face when Picard said he was going to build the nursery. She had a really, like, that moment of the gasp and shock, and you can see her processing becoming a mother in her head, and I thought she played that moment very well. Picard sitting on the stoop with the flute, I thought to myself, no matter how far back history goes, there's always somebody hanging out on the stoop, in front of their house. So that's just, I guess, timeless. Let's see. I also thought that, what if it wasn't Picard? I mean, what if it was somebody who didn't have that same kind of sensibility and logic? I mean, what if it was a Cardassian or Ferengi or Klingon? Would they be so willing to embrace the idea of being this emissary on behalf of the people, or would they be even more resistant and fight against this idea? I still want to pose this question, and that is the Truman Show question that I want to pose on the other side. Was everybody aware of Picard being this designated person in the beginning of this episode? So that means when they pretend like they didn't know he lost his memory and that they didn't know who he was that part of an act by this community of people? I'm going to pose that for the other segment on the other side. Also, I do think that Eve makes a very good point, because when we talk about Stockholm syndrome, we talk about somebody who's, basically falls in love with their captor. And so, to some degree, he has been captured. He is there against his will. Mm-hmm. And so him falling in love with that situation or endearing himself is actually a medical condition that's already been talked about. And so people do accept their situations in those kinds of scenarios, and they develop what has been labeled as Stockholm syndrome. So I do think it's an interesting perspective to bring up about the ethical aspect of what they're doing. And then the last thing I'll say is, I have a problem with them saying that they have limited missile technology, where they're able to just barely get up rockets and they barely have a phone that you can use the next day. Yeah. But they have the ability to build this probe that is able to download all this information onto somebody. It seems very sophisticated for an unsophisticated group of people. So that's my final take.
Mm-hmm. All right. Great stuff, everybody. Thank you very much, Chris McGee, Chris Garris, Matt Boardman, Carrie Schwent, Greg Kenzo, TJ Jackson, Beat Missouri, Allison Leach Hyde, Steve Case, Eve England, Chuck A, Faith Howell, Jason M. Oken, Melissa Longo for myself, Sirach, Melissa, and Mr. Aaron Eisenberg. Thank you all very much for hanging out with us. We will see you next time. And until then, always remember the 7th rule. Good job, TJ.